to join us again for another Talk It Over. We have arrived at Easter Sunday. I can't believe it's already here, but here we are. And being Easter, we've started actually a new series, which we actually launched today, which was really, really good, about being there.
Yeah.
Excellent message. So if you haven't had a chance, please go watch it. You can find it on our YouTube channel at LifeNorth.Church, and all the previous messages as well are all there, so you can get caught up, rewatch, whatever you need to do. It's all there. But before we dive into any of that today, how's it going, Dave? How are things for you?
Good. It's been a great week getting ready for Easter. Then we had a special Good Friday get together and got together with some people and did communion together. It was just really special. And I love the build up to Easter and everything that's involved with it. It's just so good. And for me, also taking time to do things like we do a fast leading up to it, and some other things like that just help to focus, because I love all the chocolates and the celebrations and all that's good. But for me, it's easy to get distracted and miss out on kind of the main point.
Yes.
And for me personally, for us as a family, and so I kind of have to put things in place to kind of focus me back in again.
Yep.
So, reading scripture and doing a fast and planning things with our family that kind of bring us back to it.
Yep.
So it's been good. I love it.
Yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in kind of the culture of the Easter, bunnies and chocolates and eggs and all those sorts of things. And again, it's easy to lose sight or, the reason for the season of Easter. I know it was great Friday. It was a great reminder again to continue to focus on God and why we're here, why He died, and the reason for Him doing that. And so that was really good on Friday. Quite enjoyed that. That was really good. The rest of the week, pretty busy. Things are picking up as for me, tire season. So it's been getting more and more busy. We're booking almost 2 weeks out now. It's just gone crazy, which it normally does. It's a little bit later than normal this year. We usually start a little bit earlier. So we might be taking snow tires off in June, but we'll wait and see what happens there.
Probably ours, by the way. We won't get to it till probably June. So yeah.
So that's all going. And then of course the excitement again on last Sunday night. It's another water leak again, which turned into a little bit of a 2-hour excursion on waiting for it to get turned off. But it was good. We had you guys there. Life groups were there helping us, bucket water, move water, trying to stop water from flooding my basement.
We're getting really too experienced at that. We're gonna stop now.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to stop that. I've gained way too much experience with water leaks, so I think it's I'm good to move past the water leaks and on. But no, it was good. And again, those life groups make a big difference. Again, we had that emergency SOS message, and off you guys are here again assisting us in that. So can't thank that enough, and so thankful for life groups and people there that we can do life with and have that support. So that's always a great way. And so I don't know for you guys what that might be, how your weeks have been. Maybe very busy leading up to Easter. I know family gatherings, of course, are generally a fairly big part of Easter.
That's right.
So let us know. Maybe it was a busy week that way. Maybe you had a similar thing about fasting, focusing on Christ, and also maybe some kind of a disaster and an emergency that happened. But of course, we love to hear from you guys. So please let us know in the comments. We would love to hear how your week has been. So this new series of Being There, Craig launched it, I think, quite well today. Very, very good. Great way to start Easter. So that was great. So this week's message title was Stop Controlling That. Which, to me, that's a very broad topic. There's lots of things that we like to get our hands in to control. And certainly a great refocus again on, is there areas of control or things that we're controlling that maybe we need to let go of. And Craig, again, did a great job of that. He touched on, you want to attempt to control what you want to attempt to control the most often reveals where you trust God the least. So trying to, control those areas, or I can manage this, again, was one of those things that I think a lot of us can touch on. And he brought up a really, good point. You got everybody to write down something fairly, vague as a prayer, and then are you willing to pass that to someone to pray for you?
Yeah.
Is that one of those things that you can let go of and trust?
Or even just admit to.
Well, even just to put it down,
admitting
right?
it sometimes is like, that's a big deal. Like, this is what I'm trying to control in my life.
Yeah. It can be a big step, and it can be daunting. It can be daunting just to even admit that maybe you are controlling that thing, or trying to control that thing, right? So, so now you don't always have the power to control, but you always have the power to surrender. And again, excellent point, because yes, we can always surrender those things to God, ask for Him to take that, to lead that, to control that, so we don't have to, right?
But it's a weird thought, because on the surface it's like, well, yeah, so what's the big deal?
Yep.
I don't have the power to control that person, but I have the power to surrender. Like, what kind of power is that when I want to control them?
Yep.
But I think when you're recognizing that we are very powerless to impact other people and circumstances outside us, you can't do much about that.
No.
And so when you're in that I've got no power mode, actually the only power you really have is about you.
Yes.
And so I'm not being controlled by that person or that situation. I can still choose to surrender. And so in that sense, you do have some control. It's just, it's different control than you think.
Yes. Yeah, it's the choices, the things you're deciding to,
I can control how I respond.
Yes, exactly.
And so I can choose to surrender in that circumstance rather than try and control what's going on.
Yes, exactly. Now, the 3 questions that Craig wants us, kind of be thinking about when we're tempted to control things. Is it worth my concern? So is it really that big of a deal, or is it kind of minor and not a real big deal? Is it mine to control? So is it something that's kind of that? Is it something that I can, make a decision, I can take handle of that and do something about it?
Kind of like, is it your responsibility?
Almost, yeah.
Right?
If it's something you can be responsible for.
Yeah.
And is it for God alone?
Right.
So something that God's the one who's going to make the change, going to look after it. Is that something that, that He is going to do? And I thought that was great. I sometimes miss that. Sometimes I think, I need to concern myself with all these things when really it's really minor and I don't need to. And I find myself sometimes concerning myself with those things, right?
Well, I know in Craig, in his leadership podcast, he talked in one of them about the law of diminishing returns, which is you make a bigger effort and you get a bigger payback to a point.
Yes.
But there comes a point where even if you put in lots more effort, you're actually not getting a bigger payoff.
Yep.
It kind of flat lines out. And so when it's a minor thing, we can actually invest all kinds of time and energy into dealing with it. And really, for what you get out of it, it's not worthwhile.
Yep.
So, right, he uses the example of like loading the dishwasher or vacuuming the floor. Like, you could invest a lot of emotional energy in controlling people to do it your way. And what do you get for it? Like, it's still carpet and it's still dishes that got to be washed again. It's not really that important.
No, but trying to do that can be extremely frustrating and get very frustrating, and again can lead to arguments and things that really again aren't of any major
Not that big a deal.
concern for anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so scripture today we're gonna read from Matthew 26 verses 36 to 40. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Wow. Stay here to keep watch with me." Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them asleep. And I know Craig touched on that a little bit. I give you one job, just stay awake. Just sit here and watch.
Well,
right?
It's interesting because we've been watching the Chosen series.
Yes.
That free TV series that is kind of following the life of Jesus.
Yes.
And I like that they try and give you, it's not in the scriptures, but they try and give you a perspective on the disciples and what they were dealing with. And you realize that they may have been exhausted or worn out, or like, it's not like they were just, floating through the day, no big deal.
Yes.
Sometimes they had a lot of work to do. And so even though they might have wanted to stay awake, you just can't, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so worn out. We were playing some card games last night, and one of our family members was just so tired that they were like, oh, I can barely keep my eyes open.
Yep.
You get to that point.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate that it lined up with when Jesus really needed them.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It was really need you at this point.
I really need you.
And again, could have been completely exhausted and just nothing to keep them awake, or just couldn't just physically stay awake anymore.
And the humanity of Jesus of like, I need you.
Yep.
I need your support in this really, really difficult moment.
Yep.
And for him, how alone he would have felt from the people around him, because he's wrestling with this really hard moment, hoping his friends will support him.
Yep. And fall asleep.
They're not up to it.
So, yeah, I thought that was a neat way to kind of start with kind of what that process was for, Jesus. And then again, him just talking about, please, is this possible? Can we stop this? Can we make this not happen?
Yeah.
As Craig, described, all God, all man. And the man part of him wanting this to not happen, that he knows it's going to be painful. Yeah. It's going to be difficult. And could you take this away? But then it's, but not my will, your will.
He surrenders.
Right. And he still does surrender to it.
Yeah.
And yet you see the humanity in him about, please, let's not do this. Can we not do this? This is not what I want. Right. So, and I think a lot of us get into that point as well, where we're like, I don't want this. I don't want this. Like, right. So.
But I love what that says about, okay, you've got Jesus in his relationship with the Father. He's modeling that for us, because at this point, he's distinct from the Father, and he's trying to stay that connection.
Yep.
And God demonstrating that it's okay to say, here's what I want. Yep. I don't want to have to face this. I don't want to have to struggle with this. Can you take this away?
Yep.
Like in the end, he's like, not my will, but your will. So
he
gets there. But I think it gives permission for all of us to be like, God, I really don't want this to happen.
Yep.
And it's okay.
Yep. And that's okay.
You don't have to say, no, my life should be suffering. It's like, no, I don't want to have to go through this.
Yeah.
If this is a way that I don't have to, then that's what I would prefer.
Yep. But if it is the way, then you have to be surrendering to that, and that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of that thinking about control, surrender. Do you find yourself being more on the controlling side, wanting to make sure things are going in a direction, or kind of just with the flow of things or the people around you?
Yeah.
Or maybe a little mix of both? What that might be for you?
Well, I think we're all a mix, and I think it also changes in seasons. I know when I was younger, I was very unsure of myself. And so I was more of a go with the flow. Like, you just tell me.
Yep.
And then when I hit my kind of teen years and hit my stride that way, then I flipped and became more of like leading and organizing and controlling what was going on. So I think there's more of that.
Yep.
I probably leaned into that more. Wanting to control myself most, but then leaning into, okay, this is how it needs to happen. This is what it's going to be. But I'm not a real. If I don't have to take charge, I will. If I don't have to control, I will. So I'm happy then to let somebody else step up.
Yeah.
And you decide how this is supposed to go. So I'm not too far in that direction. Maybe because that's not where I came from.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes sense.
But I'm an oldest, so I guess you're supposed to be the bossy one, right? The oldest one is usually like, you're supposed to take charge and.
Yeah, kind of the not matriarch, but that kind of an idea of kind of oversee.
I'm in charge of all this.
Charge of all that. Yeah.
I think I was humbled quite a bit when I was young, and so didn't have a lot of that.
Oh man, yeah, I somewhat similar. Definitely more controlling when I was in my teens for sure.
Yep.
Wanting to make sure the comfort stage, wanted to control that comfort, so making sure that I was in control of kind of what was happening, what was going, what I had, what made me feel comfortable.
Yep.
Over anything else. And so trying to keep that control of, I want to be comfortable. I want to be
Interesting. Okay.
right. So that's been, it's hard to get out of that when you're trying to surrender, and it's like your will, but my comfort, right? It's
Because it's the uncertainty, right?
It is.
If I'm
That's
in
that
control, then it's going to be okay. I can deal with it.
I can depict with the direction I'm heading.
Yeah.
Right? And so that makes it certainly more difficult.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everything with my son, that changed a lot of that. That was completely out of my control. I had no control over not just about anything that was going on. And it turned me more into kind of the flow where things are kind of moving in a direction, but I can't, there's no change, no many things I can do. But in the moments when we have an opportunity to make a decision or to do something, we would, but it was very different experience from one to the other.
That's kind of interesting, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but you reached that point where you were actively going to be a part of your son's recovery, so to speak.
Yes.
And so you were actively controlling and working on that.
I was, yeah.
And that got taken away.
It did.
And that was a bit of a crisis moment, wasn't it?
It was quite a crisis moment, and it changed a lot of, again, my thought process again, because again, getting so focused on that.
Yeah.
And yes, this is the direction, this is what's happening. I need to be doing, I need to be working out at least 3 times a week. I need to change all my eating. I need to change what I'm doing. I need to be, and then it changes immediately. And then it's like, what's the point?
It was right out of your control again.
Out of my control. So now what do? Well, I don't need to be doing all these things now. So then it's like, okay, so then I stopped doing a lot of those things, and had certainly a regression from that, because of that crisis of I've lost every direction, and now, again, it goes back to everything's out of my control again.
Yeah.
And it certainly makes it very difficult, because when you go from that kind of a control to I have no control on how I can help my son, it changes a lot of what you do and how you do things.
Yeah.
But then with that though, it's trusting God and knowing He has a plan. There is a plan. It's not that plan.
Yeah.
And it's coming to terms with that as the plan has changed. That's not the plan. And working
and that's
through
the point.
right?
That's the point that Craig talked about, but you still have the choice to surrender.
Yes.
And so you could have, even though you really couldn't control anything, you could have worked really hard at trying to control it in some way.
Oh, definitely.
Frustrated yourself, exhausted yourself.
Definitely.
But instead, you chose to surrender. And okay, God,
this
is yours. I can't do anything about this.
Yeah, and through that, we met the donor we had for Emmett, and just the experience we had through that experience with her and doing it, kind of with her, getting to meet her and more of her story and family, and again it changed the relationship for us and what it looks like to be open to a complete stranger.
Yeah.
That, for us, right? It's a big change. For me, that was really difficult, being open to somebody I don't know.
Another out of comfort moment.
Who is this person?
Yeah.
They're gonna help my son, but I have no idea about you. It's a big shift. But it's made for such the journey that he's been on, and our journey as well. And flipping through Facebook, a memory popped up about 6 months after transplant. She was having a hard day. My wife made cookies, took them over, and brightened up her day. And just thinking, it's been like 3.5 years now since that day, and just the difference that's made. And
surrender meant God provided what you needed.
Yep.
Provided a new relationship outside your comfort zone.
Yep.
And has provided you opportunities to serve in return.
Yeah.
That you didn't even know you had.
Exactly. And it's amazing to see that process. Yeah. So sometimes those moments of surrender are difficult and they can be challenging. But I do encourage you to make those choices, to make that choice of surrender, and going through those 3. Is it a big concern? Is it something for you to look after? Or is it something for God to look after? And keeping those in your mind when those moments arise can be definitely helpful in making the decision to work towards that surrender.
And sometimes it's going to change. you thought there was something you could control.
Yeah.
So you thought it was that second question. You were going, yep, this is mine.
Me. Yep.
And then it turned out it wasn't. It was actually God's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like it took so long to get to the point of this isn't yours when it could have
isn't
started off right at the beginning, but no, it turned off, but again, it's all part of the story and it's all part of the journey that we're on, and that's what it is. It's just part of the journey.
That's good.
So for you, Dave, was there an impactful part of the message, something that really kind of stood out to you?
I think just that reminder of sometimes when you're trying to control things, it's not yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I forget sometimes and my expectations or what I'd like people to do in terms of what I'd love to see for them in their lives. And I think I can have an impact. And I'm kidding myself. I'm really lying to myself, and really I have no control over that. And it really was God's.
Yep.
And so by trying to still control it and impact it, I frustrated myself, and I've worn myself out, and I've gotten disappointed when really what I should have done is kind of what you did in the end. It was like, it's not mine.
It's just, I
just have to let it be yours.
Yep.
And I need to surrender it to you. And so when Craig he talked about that a couple times, and every time I heard that, I was like, yes, I really need to learn that lesson well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard when you're trying to control those things and everything around you.
Yeah.
And I found a very similar part of that message was really good about that. And this idea again of control and trying to control what I'm doing, how I'm doing things. And then remembering, as kind of in life group last week, we talked about training and not trying.
Yes.
And that's what I need to be, working on is that training,
what
not
is
trying.
my part? Yep.
What's my part? Because I tend to lean to the control, and then when I try to control it, it leans to comfort. And so I'm like, no, I can't lean to the comfort. I need to be training, whether there's failures, setbacks.
Yeah.
I need to keep training. Yeah. I can't just try to get through things, because I'll revert back to that comfort.
That's interesting, because it sounds like you're saying then what you're surrendering is the goal. So there's the goal of work hard, get in shape, be healthy.
Yep.
Or the goal of be comfortable.
Yep.
And the one that we often want is the comfort one.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And God's like, no, that's not what's best for you. So you kind of got to surrender that.
You do.
And go with the other one.
And for me, that was like that moment when in the message when he's talking about that surrender and you can't control everything, and God needs to be the one that's directing.
Yeah.
I need to lean into that more, and I need to be training. I need to be looking for, working through the difficulties over just reverting to comfort.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting connection between the last series and this series. Yep. with all that. So I thought that was really, really good.
Power to change.
So again, we touched on this a little bit. How easy or difficult is it for you to surrender to God?
There are some things that are much easier now that I can surrender to God, but there are still things that I wrestle with big time. Still. And I know Craig talked about that in the message, that there are just areas of my life where I default back to controlling. And it's not always a conscious choice. It's not like I think to myself, I'm going to be in control of that. Like I'm going to change that person's attitude. I'm going to change that situation. You don't think that. You just think, well, I can make a difference, so I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And then maybe somewhere, hopefully down the road, you go, oh, actually, I can't.
Yep.
I just need to give it to God.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of how long does it take me to get there? How many times do I beat my head against the wall before I wake up to, no, I need to surrender that and really let God do it.
Yeah. It's difficult. And I agree fully. Some areas are certainly much easier and have gotten easier, and others are still difficult. And the comfort for sure is a difficult one. Yeah. And that's going to take a lot of training to continue to let go of that. But other areas, learning, through the mission trips that we took, the birth of children is a huge part of how you're going to, are you going to control what they do, or are you going to let God be a part of what's going on in their lives and working through you, not you working, right?
Kids is a big one.
It's a big one. It's a big one. Because there's no manuals with them.
I still struggle with that because you want to control, right? Because you want the best for them.
You do.
And sometimes it is in your control in that list.
Yep, it is. It is.
But sometimes it's just not.
No, it's not.
And it's hard.
So, yeah, a lot of those big, stepping moments in my journey certainly have helped me to realize and recognize when I need to surrender, when something isn't in my control.
Yeah.
And I can't worry about it. I'm not meant to worry about it. It's up to God, and it's in His hands to what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
and then having the mindset of I have to be okay with the outcome.
Yeah.
Whether it's a positive or a negative outcome, you have to be okay with it. Yeah. And I think that can be the difficult point. I know a lot of people like, oh, I surrendered this, and then when the outcome's bad, or it's not the one you were hoping for, then all of a sudden things get really bad.
Yeah, it's a crisis. You're right. So the surrender is not just in the moment. It's right through the process and with whatever the result is.
Yep.
That's really powerful.
Yep. And I know difficulty, especially when people are sick and you're praying for healing and want healing, and then whatever the illness is takes them away. And that's not the outcome, of course, that you want, but knowing that that was God's plan, they're in a better place, I think is the action, the direction we need to be focusing on.
Craig shared at the end, like, what's his thing, and he held up his little card that said you.
Yes.
And I think as a pastor, that's my heart, is that I see spiritually what's going on in people's lives and the pain they're causing themselves or the joy they're missing out on.
Yep.
And I really want to do whatever I can to help them get there. Mm. But I can't control them. And so surrendering the people that you see around you is really, really hard.
Yeah, because again, you're intertwined in their lives, and again, it's that parenting aspect. You want the best for them. You want the best, right? Yeah. And so you want to be a part of that to try to get them in the direction.
That's what you want, right?
Yeah. And it can be really difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more here. Okay. Is there something in your life that you're trying to control that God wants you to surrender? And what's one step you could take to surrender to Him this week?
I had one in mind and now it's gone. So I guess I'm coming up with another one. I think there's a few that I do that with from time to time. We talked about expectations. And so when I get into things, I like to think through what's the payoff going to be, like where's this going to end me up?
Yep.
And I have a hard time letting that go and allowing God to direct where it's going to end up.
Yep.
So if it doesn't get there, it's what you talked about. The surrender is not just in the moment, but it's what the result is.
Yep.
And so I sometimes really struggle with the result.
Yeah.
And then the other one is I like to make the effort. I like to put in the work. It's the Protestant work ethic, right? I like to put in the work. And so when it's a time where God's like, no, I'm looking after this, you can't do anything about it, I get kind of antsy about that. And I feel like, I'm being lazy or I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
And God's saying, no, it's a gift. I've got this covered. I'll get you there.
Yep.
And sometimes His grace and His favor is the only thing that's going to turn people around. It's going to make an opportunity available.
Yep.
And so I've been working on something and in terms of kind of a side thing I'm doing. And I should be getting on it, doing lots of work. And God's like, no, just wait. And He's been actually bringing things and putting them in place totally outside of my control.
Yep.
And so I still struggle with that because I figure like it's supposed to be me and my effort.
I gotta
do the work, right?
I got to do the work. Yep. I hear you on that, doing the work. I agree. I definitely get into those mindsets as well, for sure. The one thing that's coming up to me, and it keeps coming up, is time. It's my time. And where does my time go? And I find a lot of that is I want to control my time, where I put it, what I do with it. Again, it leads to that comfort as well, is what's that looking like? And so I think for me, it's just surrendering that time and saying, God, what in this time do you want me to do? What is there for me to do? What is the best you want me to be doing with this time? Because again, for me, that sliding into that comfort, I can watch a show, I can play a game, I can, right? And all of a sudden you've lost, an hour of time.
Yeah.
And you could have been doing something else, right?
Yeah.
For me, is definitely time is a big one, and letting God be the director of my time and what I put effort into and what I'm using that time for.
Well, and John, my oldest son in our life group has talked about that it's about keeping God on the throne of your life.
Yep.
And we kind of keep pushing him off and like putting ourselves in the center.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I want to do with my time what I want to do, never mind what God wants.
Yep.
And it's this constant back and forth of putting him back in the middle of your life.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a constant struggle, and constantly we got to bring him back, got to bring God back into the center.
Yeah.
And just working at that. And I think as we move on with, again, surrendering more things,
Yeah.
I think it's easier to get God back in the center than it is to, right, and then trying to really get it back.
Yeah.
Wow, time flies.
Okay.
Wow, time is flying as it normally does.
Yeah.
But we've had a great discussion. I hope you guys have enjoyed the discussion as well. I certainly encourage you guys to join a life group. If you haven't started one, you can join one online with a few friends, maybe if they're not close. And you guys can go through these questions each and every week, just like we do.
Yeah.
Again, you can watch the messages. Everything's posted. It's all there. And you guys can get those different perspectives, different things out of it that maybe we can't bring. But you can certainly find with the people, of course, around you. We want to thank the tech guys behind us, again, putting this all together, making this available for you, because without them, this just wouldn't exist. And so again, yes, we want to thank you guys for joining us, and we want to remember, whoever finds God, finds life.